Two dicks, wow.
Yeah! Here we go! Here we go! Here we go!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast.
And having to go, yeah, but he did kind of do this.
What I'm hearing is you just want Tom Brady dead. Like that's all I'm hearing at this point. You just want Brady
Well,
dead.
not anymore. He's retired now, so I'm good with that. I don't want him calling games anymore because holy hell, he's hard to listen to.
Enough angry and, depressing from myself. Sterling, thank you for being able to sit there as my therapist for this episode.
Start the game already!
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast here on this Saturday morning, afternoon, as we continue to truck through this offseason. And there was actually some fairly significant news that kind of popped up throughout this week. One, unfortunately, involving my team, and the other being the massive schedule release. And there's going to be some other things that are sprinkled in. But as always, I'm Brendan. Joining me, as always, Sterling. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. We're deep into off season now, mid-May, but at least we got some nice weather to enjoy while we don't have football to enjoy. I mean, hey, 17 more weeks, man.
Yeah, it is going to be an insanely long 17 weeks. It's going to be annoying. It's going to be painful. It's just going to be, So I remember seeing a tweet this week saying people would die to watch the 3-0 Raiders versus, I want to say it was either Seahawks or Vikings game that happened at some point this year. And I'm like, yeah, I would happily watch that game again. I wouldn't be thrilled by it, but I'd be like, yay, football.
Exactly.
And so I think to start things off, obviously the biggest piece of news that kind of came out this week was obviously revolving around the schedule. And myself, I kind of hate this whole process with the NFL, with the schedule release being this big thing of where it's like, oh, there's a leak here, there's a leak there. It's just like, it's the schedule, guys.
Yeah.
Like there's no other sport in existence that has build up to what their schedule is going to be. Now, there are other leagues, for instance, like hockey and basketball are both 82 game seasons, and MLB is 162 games. So it's kind of difficult to, have this sort of thing, and there's only a finite amount of games, being only 17 games per season for us NFL fans. But even then, I just look at it and I'm going like, do we really need to media hype the shit out of this?
Right. I mean, that's the NFL. It's a way to monetize things. And I get it a little bit because being that there's only 17 games, but there's 32 teams and you play your division rivals twice, every team doesn't play every other team every season, like you see in baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer, like every other major sport. Every team plays each other at least once.
Yeah.
In the NFL, you don't get that. So I do understand a little bit because sometimes, you live in a certain city, but you're a fan of another team and you're like, God, I hope they come to town this season finally, and things like that. So I get it a little bit. But yeah, the extreme hype and then the freaking out over leaks and stuff, it's like, who cares that much? It's not like we're leaking war plans on the internet.
Yeah, for me, the only thing that I really actually care about when seeing the schedule is how many primetime games the Chicago Bears are going to be playing. And, the last few years I've been saying, frankly, I would rather not see the Bears play on primetime because I don't think they deserve it. And like, to me, this always kind of comes down to a discussion of where we often say when we do our game predictions throughout the regular season, we go, man, this is a terrible primetime game. We'll have a situation where it's like Panthers Giants. And I remember it was that game when they went out to Germany, and like, this must be like America saying we're still upset about World War II, because like that's the level of just bad that we sent them. And it's like, I don't love seeing teams get primetime games when they frankly don't deserve it. Like, I saw all of the teams that had primetime games Bears had, I want to say 5, and I'm looking at that going, that's too many. They frankly don't deserve that many. And then I looked at the Cowboys. Want to take a guess of how many games the Cowboys have?
Don't they have 6?
8. 8 primetime games.
Yeah.
This is a team.
Yeah, they're like tied for the most or something like that with the Chiefs.
Yeah. And here's the thing with the Chiefs, I get it. They were the team that won the Super Bowl 2 out of the last 3 years. And they were in the Super Bowl the last 3 years. That team deserves to be in primetime most of the time. You're telling me that the Cowboys, the team that hasn't done dick, that has had 5 playoff wins since the start of the 1990s, and has just been a team that has just been the constant laughingstock of the league, it feels like, for the last 10 years. They deserve 8 primetime games, especially after the season they had last year.
Right.
And
I'm looking here too. You may have miscounted. I am only seeing 3 primetime games for your Bears this year.
As I will quickly just take a look myself, but yeah. I think it is more, but looking here, we have the Monday night game, we have the Fox game, then we have another, that's 2. I know we have a Thursday, or we have the Black Friday game, and then we also have a Saturday game. So I'm kind of counting those
Black
as
Friday.
Yeah. So it's either 4 or 5, but I know the Black Friday game is considered a primetime game, and I also do consider those Saturdays as primetimes as well, because they're split off and you're not having a full slate of games on that day. It's only like maybe 2 type games on that particular day. It's kind of like when we have the Monday night, where we have the 2 games on Monday night. Yes, one is more considered the primetime game because it has the main crew and this sort of that, but they're both primetime games is kind of what I'm knocking at there. But going back to this kind of conversation where I look at it and I say, week number 1, Bears play the Vikings on Monday Night Football. There's going to be some intrigue there. Because, again, one of the things that we're going to be talking about a little bit later is going to be a storyline that's going to be followed throughout this game. It's going to be Ben Johnson versus Brian Flores in this particular game. And Brian Flores, as a defensive coordinator for the Vikings, has only had 7 games where his defense has allowed 30 points. 4 of those have come against Ben Johnson. So there's that kind of storyline, and it's how is Caleb going to look in year number 2, and how is JJ McCarthy going to look in essentially year number 1 for him as a starter? Because, and then that's like another discussion right there, because JJ McCarthy, yes, he's going into year number 2, and yes, he was in the study room, but he wasn't able to practice for the entirety of last season. So It's not like he's going to be as fresh as, say, when we saw Mahomes go out there, because Mahomes was able to be in the room learning, but he was also able to go out there on the practice field and actually show what's happening. So there's going to be a handful of interesting storylines there, but I also look at the Bears and go, man, I just don't think they deserve to be in a bunch of primetime games, mostly being because they were a 5-win team last year. Sure, they got Ben Johnson, they got, Colston Loveland, they did this entire offseason where they just got a ton of players in there, just making things look really, really good and hyping them up to a high level and all this sort of things. But I just go, are we really looking at this team and saying they deserve to be in primetime games? Because what happens if they do struggle throughout the early stages of this season and they just look bad at the start of things? If people are going to be like, are we really having the Bears being one of the first primetime games of the year? And this kind of makes me think that the NFL should reevaluate how they do primetime games based on the team's success. Because let's be honest here, the team that finished at the bottom of their division shouldn't be getting primetime games. If you finish 4th in your division, you should not be getting a primetime game. That means 8 teams in the NFL don't get primetime games. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. But at the same time, I mean, when you're in a tough division like the Bears were, and there's great expectations for the team, you still kind of want to see them under the lights in prime time. And I mean, I'm even looking at the week 1 slate of games, and maybe Packers and Lions would be a better option to put on the Monday night game, but then I don't know, man.
Yeah, I also look at the week 1 Thursday night matchup where you have Dallas versus Philly. And I go, really? Like we're talking about the Super Bowl champions here. And most of the time the week 1 matchup is the Super Bowl champions playing the first game of the season going up against a team that the NFL consistently feels like could be someone that is either going to battle this team to go to the Super Bowl or going to be a team that we could see battle against them in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I don't like Dallas as a team this year. I don't think they're going to be that good of a unit. I think they're probably going to be just ahead of the Giants. They're going to be right smack dead in third.
I think so too, but the issue with the Cowboys is the same as it always is. It's America's team. It's the NFL's baby. It is the biggest merchandise seller that they have in the league. It's the New York Yankees of the NFL, and so that's why they're gonna get. They could win 0 games. They're still gonna have no less than 5 primetime games every season.
Yeah, and I just look at it and go, like, we often talk so much about there being bad primetime matchups. Either it's on Monday night or sometimes we get the Sunday night matchups again, or especially early on in the year for those Sunday night matchups until we start to get some of those flex games into those later windows. You just look at it and go, man, are we really watching this team versus this team? And they both collectively have 6 wins going into that particular time of the year. And you're just like, what are we doing here, guys? Like there needs to be a different way of evaluating and getting teams what the primetime games are.
The Thursday ones are the hardest ones because you can't
Yes.
really do much with those. I really do think that they need to expand the flex window to earlier in the season just for at least those Sunday night games. I can understand, Thursday and Monday, it's hard to move a game from one day to another, but moving it from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. shouldn't be as big of a deal in most cases. And so that's what I would like to see is them just increase that flex time so that we could maybe see some of the better teams in week 4, 5, and 6 that it's like, oh, these teams are playing really well to start the season. We didn't expect it. Let's get them in prime time instead of, oh, we thought this team would be good, but they're winless so far this year. And here you go.
Yeah, it's like you look at week number 2 for the NFL slate. The Thursday night game is Washington at Green Bay. And then you kind of go through it. The Sunday night game for week number 2 is Atlanta at Minnesota. Then we have the 2 Monday night games where we have Tampa Bay and Houston and the Chargers versus the Raiders. So, there's some intrigue for some of these games. You go to week 3, you have Miami Buffalo in Buffalo. Feel like that's going to be a little bit more of a telling game. And then you have KC versus the Giants. Wow, what a Sunday night matchup, everybody. And then you have Detroit versus Baltimore on Monday. That's going to be a good primetime game. That right there, I look at Detroit versus Baltimore as being probably the best primetime game so far in the early stages. You go to week number 4. Seattle versus Arizona for Thursday night football. Yay! Wow, that's going to be so exciting. And then you have Green Bay versus Dallas, which is just kind of one of those Miami versus New York or the Jets on Monday night, where we have Cincinnati versus Denver. Cincinnati-Denver, that should be an entertaining matchup. Week 5, look at the primetime games here. San Francisco and the Rams should be an interesting matchup for a Thursday night game. Then you go down to the Sunday night matchup where you have New England versus Buffalo. There's some intrigue there, but again, Kansas City versus Jacksonville. Again, it's not as bad as Kansas City versus the Giants, but speaking of the Giants, they then play week 6 against Philadelphia on Thursday night. Then you have Detroit versus Kansas City for the Sunday night game, which is a fairly decent matchup. Buffalo versus Atlanta is kind of like one of those meh type games. Bears versus Commanders, there's going to be a lot of interesting talk about that game.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we'll need to see how both of these two teams kick off the season. Another good Thursday night game where we have Pittsburgh versus Cincinnati. That should be a really interesting battle. Atlanta versus San Francisco. That's kind of just one of those meh games. Tampa Bay versus Detroit. Same sort of situation. Houston versus Seattle. It's just kind of meh. Going into week 8, this will be the last week that I kind of do this, just kind of elevate the point. Minnesota versus Los Angeles. Kind of one of those meh type situations. Green Bay at Pittsburgh. Again, it's still kind of one of those meh type matchups.
Well, yeah, and I mean that one is a early Sunday morning matchup too, because that one's in Ireland.
It says that it's in Ayrshire right now.
Oh, yeah, it's Packers and Steelers in week 4. Oh,
I'm saying that
be
this is week 8.
week 8.
Looking at week number 4 right
Weird.
here. It's showing Minnesota versus Pittsburgh in Ireland.
Okay. Oh, huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought it was the Packers we were playing over in over there.
I feel like it was maybe one of those things of where a lot of people assumed it was going to be Pittsburgh Packers. But yeah, that's the Sunday night game. That's kind of one of those meh type matchups. And depending on what this Monday night matchup could be with how both of these teams are doing, Kansas City and Washington, it could either be a really good matchup or it could be one of those meh type matchups. It's basically the point that I'm just trying to make there is how many of these matchups did I just kind of say meh? Like there's probably better games that could be had on this particular slate. And when I view primetime games, I want to see the best matchups of that week.
Yeah. Yeah, see, and I mostly agree with the Sunday night game, especially, and the Monday night game. Thursday, I don't really care about myself. But, you know, that's because I rarely ever get to see a Thursday night game. Yeah. And so for me, it's like, throw the garbage game on Thursday. I'd rather the really good game that should be a primetime game be in one of the earlier windows on Sunday so I can watch it.
Yeah, and Thursday night games are always really difficult anyways because the teams are coming off of most of the time 3 days of practice where you get Tuesday, Wednesday, and even it's pretty much closer to 2 days worth of practice because most teams, even on that Thursday window, don't practice on Monday because they need their players to get rest after having essentially a car crash every 30 seconds. Yeah. And so it's really like you're not seeing elite sort of plays or kind of all that sort of situation. But yeah, I don't know. I don't love a lot of the primetime stuff. I feel like it should be dependent on the best matchup possible for the week.
It should, but as we said, you know, in the past, they'll set that, and then we get to week 8 or week 9, and it's like, oh, it's a 2-win team against a 1-win team because the team just isn't doing very well that year. Yeah. You know, and so that's where it becomes difficult, and that's where I would like to just see them at least increase that flex window for the Sunday night game, if nothing else.
Yeah, maybe start it instead of, I think it's like week 8, you started at week 4 of going like, okay, we're starting to see some of these teams do this, and that.
And they always do this double primetime games on Monday nights. I don't know why they haven't played with the idea of doing that on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
Having 2 games on Sunday night instead of 2 on Monday night. I don't know why they haven't tried doing that yet. Maybe they're worried it's going to split the viewership on their Sunday night football, and so then they won't be able to go, hey, look at how many viewers we have for one game.
Yeah, I know with Monday night it's ESPN and they can have 2 different crews, but then again, I always look on the Monday nights when they do the splits. I'm watching the main crew anyways because I really like Troy Aikman and Joe Buck. To me, I will hands up say they're the best announcing crew in pro football right now. I hate that Fowler has to work with Dan Orlovsky, and I'm forgetting the other guy that's also in that group, but Orlovsky on game calls is horrible.
Yeah.
He like, but yeah, I also really dislike the Sunday night crew as well. I think they do a horrific job. And so I would like to see that be split as well, but NBC is only doing the one game per week, so they would need to have a secondary crew as well. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting to say the least, but I know both of us throughout the week we were kind of texting forth from some of these leaks, just kind of both looking at each other like, really, can this not just be like, is this really having to be this media sized? And as someone who works in the media world, I just kind of look at it and I go like, I'm kind of ashamed of this. You know, it's really, really dumb. And of course, a lot of this stuff in terms of what people are talking about, in terms of what happened with the NBA draft lottery, saying there's a lot of people now coming out saying, should the NFL have a draft lottery? I'll tell you right now, if the NFL ever puts together a draft lottery system, I revolt. Like I can't have the NFL have a draft lottery system. I've made it very clear in every sport. I think draft lottery systems are stupid. They're pointless. People say, "Oh, it prevents tanking." Shut up. Like it really doesn't. Like you're not telling me today in professional athletes world that a coach is going to walk into a room and say, "Hey, listen, we are going to tank this season so that we can have the first overall pick." Coaches aren't going to do that. Players aren't going to do that. The only people that are actively tanking are management teams, and they're making that really, really obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And the
by
worst,
firing and trading everybody.
yeah. And most of the time, that's because they know that this is the best course of action for their team. And you look at the Bears. They did that the first year that Ryan Poles was there. I would say that, you know, moving forward, that's probably been the best decision for that organization.
Yep.
And you're telling me that a draft lottery would make this better? Like, I read a tweet today that said, imagine a draft lottery in the NFL where a team that won 2 games suddenly now has the 6th pick.
Yeah. That's just horrible for the team. You know, I don't like the draft lottery system in any of the leagues that they're in. I don't mind the idea of reforming it. There is one format that I really like where it's once you have teams that are officially eliminated from the playoffs, whichever of those teams wins more games after elimination gets the first pick.
The only
and
problem
so then you
that
have reason to try to be winning once you're already eliminated from playoffs.
The problem that I have with that is that I still think every team out there, no matter what week they're kind of in, is going out there and giving their best. And it's one of those things, like, for instance, I know the PWHL has this sort of system where it's once you're officially eliminated from playoffs, you start going on a different point system to try to get the number 1 overall pick. I look at that and go, like, for instance, look at the Titans this year, who were the first team eliminated from the playoffs. Now, I don't think they ended up winning many games after that point, but it's one of those situations of where, let's say, I'm just trying to throw out a team, like let's say, for instance, the Raiders. They had a good stretch to end off the season, and they are clearly a better team. And they were just eliminated, but they ended up winning 3 out of their last 6 because they were eliminated 6 weeks past the playoffs, and they get the first overall pick just because they simply won more games. I look at that and I go, it's still not fair to some of these teams that ultimately just genuinely have bad rosters and aren't going to win these games anyways. Like, I understand where it's, you want to see more competitive games from some of these teams later down the line. I just kind of look at that and going, the better teams in these scenarios are ultimately going to end up with better picks. And it's sort of kind of still steering some of these teams down this line of, well, we were genuinely not, like, we're trying every single game and we just genuinely lost all these games, and we've won 2 games throughout the year, and a team that has 7 wins has the first overall pick because going into that final stretch of the year, they had 4 wins and they ended up winning their final 3 games of the year and ultimately getting that. Like, for me, that would still be the problem that I have with it. I just view it as the worst team should have the rights at the best player. And the reason why I say that is because even if you have the first overall pick, how many times have we said in just the NFL that the first overall pick has been a bust? That the first overall
100%.
pick has been outplayed by the second overall pick. Look at last year. Jane Daniels outplayed first overall pick Caleb Williams. CJ Stroud the year after outplayed quarterback Bryce Young, who was first overall. Like, there's countless times that we can say these sort of things. It all depends on who your management side is and what the situation of your current team is.
Yeah, and I mean there is no perfect system for doing a draft lottery or seeding the draft picks, because like even doing it the way it is now, it's still frustrating sometimes because you see some teams that are so bad and they get good players, but they don't know how to manage those players properly, so they're still so bad they get that first overall, second overall pick again. And it's like, it would be nice for them to still get punished for just being a bad overall managed team as well. And with the NFL, I don't think we'd see as much change in the actual draft seeding as we would in some of the other leagues, because there's oftentimes we get all the way to the final week of the year and only 3 or 4 teams have been eliminated by that point. And so if you get eliminated in the last week of the season, you can't add any wins. So your record determines where you're picking. It would be the exact same. It would really just be those top 4 where it's like, okay, well, this team was eliminated in week 11 and this one was eliminated in week 13. And the team that was eliminated in week 11 has won more games since then, and so they end up with that pick. You know what I mean? And so I wouldn't be opposed to that one, is all I'm saying. I also don't want to see a draft lottery. I hate the draft lottery in the other leagues as well. The other leagues I think would be more beneficial of this system that I'm mentioning. The NFL doesn't really have enough games, to do something like that. Much like the lottery, I feel like there's just not enough information from the season to be able to determine how a lottery should be played out, because I don't think the worst 5 teams should be entered into a draw to figure out who gets that first pick. That's not how it should be. If you've got a team that's got 1 win and then all the others have like 6 above them, then it should be hands down that 1-win team gets that first overall pick.
Yeah, we also talk about the NFL, especially over these last couple of years of, oh, the NFL is scripted, this, that, and the other thing, and there's so much scrutiny. Like, just imagine the amount of hate that the NFL would get, like, if they implemented a draft lottery system. And let's say, for instance, the Kansas City Chiefs have a season of where Patrick Mahomes gets taken down from a season-ending injury, and they end up winning 6 games that year, and they're slotted at the 7th pick. But just so happens, they win the draft lottery, and they get the first overall pick. People are going to be like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, they're already going to get a really good spot because they lost their franchise quarterback. Now you're just going to make them even better.
Yeah.
And just imagine, like, the Dallas Mavericks ended up winning the draft lottery in the NBA with like a 1.8% chance. Imagine the Dallas Cowboys if they had the 12th overall pick this year and they ended up moving up to first overall. Imagine the NFL just going like, oh, it's just Jerry Jones going over to Roger Goodell saying, here's a couple of $1 million in your pocket, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, first overall pick. It's just a horrible thing that just creates more problems than it solves.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's no transparency in a draft lottery system. You don't know if there's anything going on behind the scenes. When it's laid out simply in based on your record, there's no arguing.
Yep, there's nowhere to hide.
Even with the system I was putting forward, based on how many wins you get after you're eliminated, there's no way to fudge that. The numbers are right there for everybody to see. And so those are better systems. Anything where it can be decided behind the scenes is not a system that we want to see in the NFL.
I think ultimately the best way to deter teams, for instance, not utilizing their talent, because again, you bring up a really good point. There's just teams in the NFL, and my Chicago Bears have been guilty of this throughout the last probably 15 years of where they just don't have the intelligence to properly manage these really high end picks that they end up getting. And what it should be is that every owner should be sat down and said, listen, you have to make the playoffs 3 out of the 10 years, and you have to have at least a winning record 5 out of those 10 years, or you're going to be forced to sell.
Yeah.
Like, because at the end of the day, I think there's general managers out there that want to go out there and do as good a job as possible. For instance, you look at the Bengals. I'm sure they want to give as much money to Trey Hendrickson as they possibly can, and they're probably maybe just a little bit off on this situation, but it's the ownership going, no. You just paid Joe Burrow. You just paid T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Like, we can't afford to keep doing this. Like, that's money that's going out of my pocket, and this, that, and the other thing. And we talk about those sort of situations.
But even that situation, that wouldn't result in an owner selling, because even with how bad the Bengals defense are, they're still having winning seasons. You know,
True.
and things like that. You know, because basing it on making the playoffs is a little bit tougher because it's a very difficult league.
Yes.
And so, like, you could run into a situation where then every 10 years, 14 of the teams have to be sold at season's end. And so then you end up with 14 new owners, and 10 of them go, oh, okay, well, I bought the team, but I'm moving it.
No, totally. Like, I'm not
Right?
saying it would be a great system, but at least
there-
it's something that's keeping ownership for their
Mhm.
teams accountable, of basically saying you have to at least be trying to actively compete for championships year in, year out. Now, we expect there are times when it's situations of like, okay, you have to rebuild, and because either your team is so expensive at this point, like it's just, again, we're both trying to find ways to make the league better as opposed to a draft lottery. That could be a system that could potentially motivate
Exactly.
some
And I
people.
mean, with that, the wins after elimination process that I had there, that would motivate those owners as well, because a lot of them are like, oh yeah, I don't care if I finish in the bottom 2 because we're going to get such a good player. We're going to make so much profit on merchandise sales. Who cares? But if all of a sudden it's like you're eliminated and then another team gets eliminated the next week but wins 2 in a row, then all of a sudden you're going, fuck, we're not going to be able to get those jersey sales now. And so then the ownership and the management's like, we got to do something. But yeah, I agree. There's got to be a way to make sure we don't have intentional tanking. Like, we don't see it as much in the NFL, but there's one particular team in Major League Baseball especially that doesn't necessarily tank, but refuses to spend money. And the owner has simply stated, I make as much money from a losing season as I do from making the playoffs. I have to spend more money if we get to the playoffs because I have to keep the stadium open longer. And so for him, it's just a matter of as soon as I break even on the year, I don't care what happens after that. I'm selling everything and walking away with my profit. And it's
Good
terrible to
old
see that
Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yep, 100% Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yep.
It's awful to see that there's owners in professional sports that do exactly that. But
Yeah.
I mean, what can we do to the billionaires, really, right?
Yeah, like I remember, if anyone has watched the series Winning Time, it's about the Lakers when they got Magic Johnson, and it is one of those, it's an incredibly fun, interesting series, because if you're a basketball fan, or even if you're not a basketball fan, it's one of those things where you get to see in the mind of Jerry Buss, who was kind of the architect of the modern day NBA, bringing out ball girls, kind of like the dancers and that kind of thing, and making it an event to go to, not just, for instance, a sporting event. Like, this is a show that you are going to, but also the ruthless, if we are not winning, I'm going to find someone else who wants to win at the highest level. And I just remember watching that series going like, man, I wish I had Jerry Buss as the owner of the Bears saying, you know what, I don't care if I have to fire this guy and lose a shit ton of money doing it, because I want to win. And you see it with the Lakers even still today, with the Jerry Buss not being alive and in charge of the organization. I'm pretty sure his daughter is still the owner of the team, and so kind of has that sort of mentality. But it's one of those things where, like, going back to the 80s, the Lakers are still exactly what they're supposed to be. You don't see very often that the Lakers are one of the worst teams in the league. And you kind of want that. But moving forward from this schedule kind of talk, there is a vote coming up this upcoming week that is going to determine some situations for playoffs. So Sterling, I'll let you take over with this.
Well, yeah, this is a big vote coming up. A lot of us, you and I included, have been talking about this for years, that we're frustrated with seeing 10, 11, and 12 win teams have to go on the road in the playoffs to face an 8 or 9 win team that just happened to win their division. And so next week, the owners are being put to a vote on whether or not there is a reseeding that occurs after playoffs are set, so that if you have a wild card team in the 7th seed that has 12 wins and the division winner of whatever South division it is that has 9 wins, they no longer get that home game. They're still in the playoffs, but they're basically going to go, okay, now you guys as division winners are the 7 seed, and this team that has 12 wins is moving up into getting a home game. And I think this is a great thing. I hope the owners vote yes on this, because it's not going to change who makes the playoffs. All it's going to change is that the better teams have home field advantage, which is what it should be.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think this is probably the best way to go forward with this playoff situation. I know for me, I'm kind of in the very vast minority where I sit back and say, I don't think just because you won your division, you should be a playoff team. I've made that very clear for years, where if you are an 8-win team and you won your division and you're kicking out a team that ended up winning 10 games, frankly, I don't think you deserve to be there, because if it took 8 wins for you to win your division, your division shouldn't count. Like, again, I know this week with all the news stuff that came out that we were supposed to schedule for our all division teams that we were going to be talking about. And one of the things that you and I discovered throughout this week is that there are some divisions that are really, really difficult to actually just place individual positions when it's completely wide open. And I look at that and I go, you shouldn't necessarily be rewarded for being the best of the worst. Like
No, it's just a very fine line, because we do see at times when you have an extremely competitive division that across your division games, you get a lot of teams that go, 2-2, 3-1, and like you barely win your division because of the play within. And as a result, you maybe only win 9 or 10 total games. And then you have other divisions where there's one juggernaut and everybody else sucks. So they're guaranteed 6 wins right there because they just sweep everybody in their division.
Totally. Like, and this is why I fully understand I'm in the vast minority of this, because it isn't a perfect scenario for me. I just look at it and go, I truly don't believe a team that has a losing record. And yes, we have seen teams make the playoffs with a losing record, ultimately should be kicking out a team. Like, again, we look at the NFC North this past season. You had 3 teams that all made the playoffs. Now, there could have been a scenario of where we had, for instance, let's just say the NFC South, the worst division in the NFC. Let's just say the Buccaneers only had 8 wins and they pushed one of those teams out. If the Bears were the 3rd team in that spot and they got eliminated for that, I would be really pissed, going like, I don't necessarily think that's fair that this team is being eliminated, and just because they were able to win that. And no, again, I understand that very vast minority. I don't think just because you won your division makes you a good team. I know this offseason I was talking on Twitter, having a civil discussion on Twitter with a Cowboys fan saying that, oh, the Bears should hire Mike McCarthy. Oh, he's won his division, man. Like, it's so good. And like, to me, winning your division doesn't tell me if you're a good team or not. And because
No, you're good at preparing for your division. And
yeah,
that the unfortunate thing is that really is how this league is built right now.
yes,
And we may see a change when we get some expansion teams and get a restructure of these divisions. We may see them be able to shift that. But for the last 3 decades, really,
it's been divisions.
It has. It's been so focused on the divisions that you see teams specifically. Like my division itself, you see the Steelers specifically try to build a team to
To beat,
stop the Bengals and the Ravens.
yes.
They don't worry about the rest of the league. That's what they do. The Ravens and the Bengals do the same thing. They
Hmm.
build teams focused on winning their division. And then that's when you see a team that can go 6-0 in their division and then only win 2 more games across the rest of the league because their team is very much structured just to beat two specific play styles. And so then everybody else dominates them. It happens regularly.
I remember there was a year where the Raiders only won 6 games in that year, and all 6 of those games were division wins.
Yep.
And to me, I look at that and I go, well, the Raiders won every game in the division, ergo, they should be the AFC West champions because they won every game in their division. So they clearly showed that they are better than these teams, but they lost every other game of the season.
Yeah. Well, and I believe there was one of the seasons where Mike Tomlin went 8-8 or 9-7. They won 5 of their division games. They went 5-1 in the division, but were only able to win 3 or 4 of the rest of the games that season. And so it does. It makes it very difficult with the way the league is laid out right now to make significant changes to how teams build, to how we do the draft seeding, how we do the playoff seeding. But this playoff seeding vote is a good first step.
Yeah,
You know,
I think both of us say this is the best thing that the NFL could do.
It is. Adding the 7th seed was a good initial step as well. You know, it changed things up a little bit, made it a little more interesting, a little more to play for at the end of the year. Now, doing this playoff seeding, it's going to make it so that when we get 3 or 4 years down the road, we can legitimately have that discussion of, hey, these 7, 8 win teams that are winning their divisions, maybe they shouldn't be in the playoffs. Maybe we need to do a bit more of a restructure and just go to straight up conference instead of divisions. You know, and that may happen as we start seeing the expansion into the UK, which, you know, we're all pretty convinced that's what Roger Goodell's trying to do.
Yeah, well, Roger Goodell has openly stated he wants teams in Europe at this point, and you know, the NFL hasn't had an expansion team since 2001. This is the longest stretch of time that the NFL in its entire existence has never had a new team enter the league.
Yeah, I mean, granted, the league is pretty full. You know, 32 teams. That's when you only have 14 making the playoffs. That is a lot, because that's something that'll have to be discussed too. If they put 2 teams in the UK or expand 4 more teams, then you all of a sudden you got to go, okay, well, you know, if we got 34, 36, 38 teams, we need to start increasing how many are making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I've looked at, and you and I have talked about this before, but the actual idea of having 4 teams in Europe, whether it's like it's not as difficult as a feat as people think it would be, because again, you're playing all your home games, so you would have at least 8 home games, 3 of those against the 3 other, European teams, but you're also still having to travel to those 3 European teams for your 3 away games.
Yep.
So right there, you're only having to travel into the United States for 5 games, and you can do 2-week road trips there, where you have 2 weeks where you just simply stay in the country at a designated hub. For instance, you could have a hub in Chicago because they have the infrastructure to do those sort of things. You could have it at this team or this spot, and it could be very easily done. But
well, you could have it in really whatever sector of the country that you're playing those away games in, because oftentimes when you're playing away games outside of your division, it's usually against another specific division. It's very rare you have just a one-off from one random division. You know, so if you're playing the NFC North teams, then yeah, you're gonna stage in Chicago, you're gonna play a game in Chicago, you're gonna play a game in Detroit, maybe play a third game in Green Bay, and then you're gonna go home. You know, or whatever it ends up being. So yeah, you could definitely do that as a 1 2-week road trip and 1 3-week road trip. Or in some cases, you could potentially just do a full 5-week road trip for something like that. You come over, you play all your US games, and then you're back home for the rest of the year. And then just do 1 or 2 teams at a time doing that, and you're there. Because
Yeah.
really, if we have the expansion, we're likely going to have a longer season as well. So having 4 teams over there coming over for 5 weeks at a time, that's 20 weeks. That works perfectly,
Mhm.
you know. And so it is very real. It's at this point, I think just Roger Goodell going, okay, which countries are we going to be able to do it that it's going to sustain profitability for the future, not just be a flash for a year or two and then tank. We need something that we know is going to be able to stay popular for 10, 20, 50 years.
I think you'll see 2 teams in the UK. I think you'll see a
Yep.
team in Germany, and it's kind of that. You might even see 2 teams in Germany because both Berlin and I forget the other city that they've ultimately played games in. I don't even know if they played games in Berlin, but like they've had
No.
multiple games out there in Germany. But
Yeah. First one in Berlin, I believe, is this year, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers, Minnesota Vikings.
that's in Ireland.
Oh, it is in Ireland. You're right.
Yeah.
My bad. Yeah. My
Yeah,
bad.
and we might even be talking about it being a
Yeah.
situation of where
I was
it
thinking
is
Dublin,
Ireland.
not Berlin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be a situation of where it's 2 teams in the UK, a team in Ireland, and then a
Yeah.
team in Germany. That sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously we got off on a very, very ADHD rant on that, talking about the playoff seeding, but ultimately, yeah, I think both of us are really in hopes that the NFL votes in favor of this playoff reseeding, because a team that
Mm-hmm.
has 9 wins, just because they won their division, shouldn't necessarily be hosting a game against a 12-win team. It should
Yeah.
be, once you make the playoffs, who has the best record gets the first seed, and then it just trickles down.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the first seed obviously is going to remain the first seed. That's not going to change.
Yeah.
But
Even
beyond that,
likely the second
in
seed
a
is
good
probably
enough
going to stay.
division, well, we said that last year. I believe the Detroit Lions would have been the number 2 seed last year in the playoffs if they had restructured this way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know there was a big conversation last year of when the Lions and Vikings played
Yeah.
their game in, like, I think it was week 17. The winner of that team would automatically be the first team, or they would get the rights at first in their or in the
Yeah.
conference. And the other team would drop all the way down to 5.
Yeah.
Which it was insane to think about, just after both teams having miraculous years and just being unstoppable, that you would go all the way back down to 5 in that scenario, when realistically it should be 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And it's, I think both of us are really hopeful that the NFL votes yes on this. Another big piece of breaking news that we ended up seeing just yesterday was Brock Purdy getting his payday. And honestly, whether you think Brock Purdy is a good quarterback, whether you think he's a bad quarterback, I think we can just all sit back and say, like, good on Brock, man. Like,
Yep.
he got paid, and rightfully so.
Yeah. I mean, he went from being Mr. Irrelevant to being a starter of one of the most historic franchises in the league, and holding on to that position. So yeah, I mean, good on him for getting that payday. He now is going to have to prove that he's worth that. I know there's a lot of people out there that are just, you know, he's a system quarterback, which fine, as long as the system doesn't change, he's going to be great. But what happens if Kyle Shanahan leaves before that contract is up?
Yeah, there's going to be a big discussion there. Now, Brock Purdy isn't making the most amount of money in the NFL. He's making $53 million annually, which ties him with Jared Goff in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the quarterbacks that are making more money than Brock Purdy. Tua Tagovailoa at $53.1 million, Trevor Lawrence at $55 million, Jordan Love at $55 million, Josh Allen and Joe Burrow both at $55 million, and Dak Prescott at $60 million. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I tweeted this immediately after seeing this report, saying, is Brock Purdy slightly overpaid? Probably, but he's making less than Tua, he's making less than Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott, while doing more over 2.5 seasons of play, while also
Mm-hmm.
making it to a Super Bowl before Josh Allen.
Well, and here's the tough thing. A lot of the quarterbacks are overpaid.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm.
because even 4 of those 6 that are making more than Brock Purdy, they're overpaid as well. And it, it's a problem with the quarterback market, really. And
It
we're
is.
seeing it across the league. We saw the edge market get reset this year, the wide receiver market last year. It seems to be what the NFL is doing right now is there's one guy, we're going to give him a massive deal, and then everybody else is going to have to pay their players of indeterminate quality the same amount of money, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, when you and I are talking about the top paid quarterbacks, again, I think we both sit back and say Joe Burrow easily worth the 55 million. Josh
Yep.
Allen easily worth the 55 million. I would even sit back and say Jared Goff is probably worth the 53 million for what he was capable of doing over Detroit these last couple of years. I know I was really disgusted by the Trevor Lawrence getting 55 million. I think Jordan Love getting 55 million was the disgrace, and honestly, I love how much that's coming back to bite the Packers in the ass right now. Dak Prescott getting 60 million was ridiculous. You know, Tua getting the 53.1 million also probably not worth it, just, you know, due to the fact that he might die on the field at any given game.
Right.
And we all kind of knew that beforehand. But yeah, Brock Purdy getting $183 million fully guaranteed. Exactly like you said, he needs to go out there and prove it. When you have a deal of this magnitude, it's something where, yes, you did walk into a Kyle Shanahan system. Yes, you did have essentially all pro, Pro Bowler, really good player here on the offensive side of the ball. And you're starting to lose some of those guys. You don't have the Deebo Samuel. Is Brandon Ayuk going to be the same level of player? Is Ricky Pearsall going to be able to step up as a wide receiver? Is Trent Williams still going to be the greatest offensive lineman we've ever seen play this game? And, you know, is George Kittle even going to still remain at the top of his game? And are people starting to catch up with Kyle Shanahan's system? Is Christian McCaffrey going to be as healthy as he once was? And are some of the other running backs going to be able to still be capable of doing that?
And that's all on one side of the ball too. Like you got to remember that the reason they've been successful is their defense helps keep them in games. They lost a lot of defensive pieces this year, especially in their secondary. And so, you know, the other teams are going to be able to score more points on you this year, you know, from losing Greenlaw and Ward and Hafunga. Like
Three amazing players.
It's gonna get rough on him. And you mentioned George Kittle, like, yeah, he's still there now, but with the amount of money spent on other players, I don't think George Kittle resigns with San Francisco when this deal is up. I think he's gonna go to another team to finish his career. You know, and so you're gonna lose him eventually. It's, you know, Christian McCaffrey, we don't know if he's gonna be the same as he ever was. Will he bounce back? Are we gonna see another push at, you know, 20 straight games of touchdowns? We don't know, you know, and so it really is. It's Brock Purdy now is getting paid the money, and he now needs to be the top star on this team, and there's questions about whether he is capable of doing that.
Yeah, no, I will say with the 49ers, their draft kind of indicates that they do think that they need to improve this defense. Drafting Mykel Williams, the edge rusher out of Georgia, Alfred Collins, the D tackle out of Texas, Nick Martin, the linebacker out of Oklahoma State, Uptown Stout, the corner out of Western Kentucky, CJ West, the defensive tackle out of Indiana. Those were their first 5 picks, all on the defensive side of the ball. And then they started to trickle in a wide receiver, running back, safety, quarterback, guard, wide receiver. So it was basically their top picks in this draft, you know, all but one of their 4th round picks and beyond were all on the defensive side of the ball. And we do know who the defensive coordinator is, Robert Saleh. He knows that system and the way that Kyle Shanahan wants to run things. And chances are he's probably going to be there for a long time, because I don't see him getting another head coaching job out there unless someone really is desperate for something. And so, like, the 49ers might have just kind of said to us, yeah, we all have heard, you know, the concerns that you guys have with paying Brock Purdy, but we're kind of doing this. So it's going to be interesting to say the least, for sure. But I'm okay with the contract for Brock Purdy. I think it was 100% worth it.
It had to be done.
Yes.
Yeah. It was either you give him the contract or you trade him somewhere. Like those were
75%
their
of the
only
NFL
options.
teams in the league would 100% pay Brock Purdy that contract. Your Pittsburgh
Yep.
Steelers, if they
Yep.
went out there and got Brock Purdy and they paid him this contract, I'm sure you would be happy as hell.
Yep. I had even said that when they were, humming and hawing about whether they were going to get the deal done. I was like, just trade him to the Steelers then. Trade him to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Like, is he the best? No. But we've seen teams be able to win with game managers if they've got the best defense in the league.
Yeah, it's not that crazy of a situation. And
Yeah.
again, this is a guy that has brought his team to the NFC Championship 2 out of the 3 years and made it to a Super Bowl. So
Yep.
he clearly works quite well with Kyle Shanahan. And yeah, it is a like good on Brock, man. Good on Brock for getting that deal done, coming over instrumentable odds at being the final pick in the draft to now being this level of a guy. Good on him.
Yeah.
Final thing we have to kind of talk about here, which was kind of a little bit of a shocker coming out. I want to say it was on Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon. This was revolving my team and my quarterback, Caleb Williams. ESPN reporter, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'll kind of look him up here for the moment. But there was a report that came out on an upcoming book that focuses around the NFL quarterbacks, and in one of these particular chapters, it revolved around Chicago Bears quarterback Caleb Williams, and it kind of came out of left field where a lot of quotes, and one of the biggest quotes was saying, I don't want to go to the Bears, and I'm finding ways to try to avoid going to the Bears, was Caleb Williams and Caleb Williams' camp. Now, a lot of the things that were being said in this little article was, Williams was not wanting to go to Chicago because he had seen the lack of success from quarterback play and, frankly, just the offensive side of the ball that the Bears have had. Actively tried to find ways to get out of being drafted by the Bears. Met at the combine with Kevin O'Connell and said, I want to go to Minnesota. Get me to Minnesota. I want to play with Kevin O'Connell. And the media world kind of took it as like, oh, this is crazy. Like Caleb Williams really didn't want to go to the Bears, and they said to him that no matter what, we're drafting you this, and that. Yes, it's true. Like all the concerns that he had were completely warranted. I think every Chicago Bears fan reading this was going, well, yeah, I've had those exact same concerns for years too, buddy. Like, join the club.
Any NFL fan that has long-term memory still remembers that all of this was brought up as speculation during last year's draft process, during the scouting process. Like, these were all reports that were being floated, and everybody was like, oh, well, it's just clickbait. It's not real. And it's like, well, there's so much of it. There had to be some truth. And the fact that it's coming out now, just as we're entering the dead zone again, it makes me think somebody was just like, you know what? Let's throw it back out there and see if people bite so that we got some news articles we can write. And people are biting. It's just for those of us that follow it religiously, like it's not a surprise. None of the information in it is a surprise. All it feels like is somebody trying to like get a dig in on the Bears and be like, oh, we're going to drive a wedge between Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson. But it's not going to work because we've seen interviews since then. And Caleb Williams is comfortable now. Like, yeah, everything he said and all the concerns him and his father had were very true.
Oh, they all came true.
To the point where his dad was trying to get them to change the collective bargaining agreement so that players could start having more of a say where they go, which, again, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, we see it all the time, and we say it. There's teams where careers go to die. If you get drafted by the Browns or the Jets, you're likely not going to have more than a 3-year career and you're done.
Yeah.
Right? And so I do understand that, but just funny the timing on it for me. but I was not shocked by any of the stuff that's being said. I'm like, no, I heard this last year before he got drafted.
Yeah.
You know, it was part of the reason that he held out so long to sign that rookie deal, because they were still working on things going, I don't know if I want to be here long term because I don't know if I'll have a career. And
No,
I think
I will say, like, I will counter with that. Like, the rookie contract stuff, that really wasn't an issue for him. It was just wording in some of the details. He
Yep.
was like, once he got to the Chicago Bears, like, there was a quote in this where he met with the Bears at their facilities, and that was the pivotal moment for him, where he went back to his dad, Carl Williams, and said, I want to do it for this team. I'm going to the Chicago Bears. And from that moment on,
Yeah.
everyone, like, he was fully committed. He had no issues. The rookie contract thing, I don't think there was any worry at that point of that. It was more or less just kind of like trying to find different wording in certain things, because we know with rookie contracts there's only so
Yeah.
much that you can do.
Yeah, I just feel like some of the wording in there was probably a way to get him out of there after his rookie deal if things don't get better in Chicago. I'm sure that was part
Maybe.
of the wording they were trying to work in there, being like, we want it so it says you guys can't franchise tag me or something like that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, reading a bunch of the stuff where, for instance, Carl Williams said the CBA is the worst piece of shit that he's ever read, and
Mhm.
frankly, I think both of us would say the exact same thing about this current CBA. I hate the franchise tag. I don't think you should have the right to franchise tag a player. You have a
Yep.
contract time window, and if you don't agree to restructure or find something like that, that's a whole different discussion that we'll likely have over the upcoming months. But both of us agree the CBA isn't that great. There was some questions where Caleb Williams was potentially willing to sign with the USFL and
Yep.
become a free agent this year to essentially choose the team that he wants to go to and become a free agent that way, which again was an option they explored. And
Mhm.
one of the big things that I saw in that report was the Caleb Williams camp had talked with Archie Manning, the father of Eli Manning, and where they orchestrated the get out for Eli Manning from not being the San Diego Chargers quarterback. Because I
Yep.
think people forget that Eli Manning was drafted first overall, not to the New York Giants, but to the San Diego Chargers. And they orchestrated and saying, we're not going here. This is not the place where we want to be.
Yep.
And sort of that sort of situation. And obviously that made its rounds and headlines, and a lot of people were kind of talking about that. And at one point, the Caleb's camp was ready to nuke the city of Chicago, and Carl Williams was essentially standing there with gasoline ready to go. But
Mhm.
he also stated, I am not going to do anything or say anything unless Caleb gives me the green light. And Caleb
Yep.
said, I am not ready to nuke the city of Chicago. That's not something that I want to do. And so they didn't. And again, the biggest quote that I take away from this entire article is, again, that meeting with the Bears, coming back to his family and saying, I want to do it for this team and this city. I'm going to the Chicago Bears. To me, that is the only thing that matters in this entire article, is him
Yep.
sitting back, and it's his decision saying, this is where I want to go. Because he wants to do it. And I said this last year before the draft process. It was just as much of an interview for the Bears interviewing Caleb as Caleb interviewing the Bears. And I said Ryan
Mhm.
Poles needs to convince Caleb Williams that this is the spot for him. And he did that. Now, Caleb Williams also had quotes in there saying, I have concerns about Eberflus. I have massive concerns about Shane Waldron. And who couldn't have concerns with those guys?
Right.
I said going into last year's process, the Bears made a massive mistake by not firing Eberflus and bringing in a young offensive mind. And we all knew Ben Johnson wanted to come to the Bears last year.
Yep.
He did. You look at what happened with the Commanders when they fired their coaching staff, brought in a bunch of new people. because you knew that no one was going to be fired after year number one. You were going to have consistency. And that was my biggest problem, was you're doing the exact same thing over again. Yes, this kid might be 10 times talented than Justin Fields and 1,000 times more talented than Trubisky, but you're putting him in that same problem. Another thing that came out in this article was the Bears coaching staff was not giving Caleb Williams clear directions on where and how to watch film for upcoming games. So
Right.
we talked so much about the end of the season of how Caleb Williams' rookie season was not a failure. Like, it was actually a pretty good rookie season under all the situations that we laid out, which was your head coach being a dumbass. Then you're firing Shane Waldron because he was a dumbass and didn't know how to call plays. Then firing Eberflus for continuing to be a dumbass. Then having a third offensive coordinator come in, while also having Thomas Brown step up, who's never been a head coach at any level, having the worst offensive line in football, and having a defense that was just kind of giving up at points. And we talked all about that without the knowledge that he wasn't being coached on how to watch film. Caleb Williams threw for 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, with only 6 interceptions, purely off of vibes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he had to build his own film room in his house so that he could study film for the game. So I'm sure that was probably the first thing that was put to Ben Johnson when he interviewed with Ryan Poles was, hey, can you do something about the film room situation?
And I'm sure Ben Johnson went, what do you mean the film room situation?
Right. I'm surprised that Ryan Poles didn't step in last year and was like, wait, what? No, we're going to do this. Because at some point, you gotta manage your fucking team. If the coaches aren't doing the job, then as a GM, you should be stepping in to do that. And I don't know. That last year
was a mess.
Was a horrible managed situation for the Chicago Bears. And as you put it, Caleb Williams was just out there surviving on vibes. And he is extremely lucky that he did not take a bad injury last season with how it played out for him. Like,
Yeah.
we're lucky that he didn't have any even minor injuries really crop up for him, which was good, because now he's going into hopefully a safer situation with a much better O-line, an actual head coach, and hopefully a film room.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, I look at this entire situation, and funny enough, Ben Johnson, the day that article came out, he was scheduled to be on the Colin Cowherd show. And whether you like Colin or not, you know, that he point blank asked, what's your thoughts on this? And Ben Johnson said, you know what? I don't really care, because every conversation that I've had with Caleb, he's 100% committed to this team. He's excited to be here. He wants to do nothing but great things for this team. And yeah, frankly, the history of this team not having a 4,000-yard passer, I expect him to be a 4,000-yard passer this year and for many more years after that. And, you know, I don't really care about all the stuff that happened beforehand, because it's different now. But it is kind of hilarious to watch the Chicago Bears organization go through all the years of just doing things the incorrect way to finally have this year Kevin Warren stepping in saying, listen, dumbasses, you want to continue to be just the laughing stock of the entire NFL, or do you want to start actually winning something? This is what you have to do. You have to pay money to get the best coach. And then once you pay that coach, you also have to pay some money to get even better coaches underneath him. And that's what they did. And then you have to go out there and draft the smart way and add the pieces and get signed free agents and trade for the proper guys and this, that, and the other thing. With all of this being stated, the pressure on Caleb Williams is going to be that much higher. Now, it's not going to be if Caleb Williams doesn't have a good year this year that he's going to be kicked to the curb. He has a 2-year window. And like, all this stuff can come out. But you got the offensive-minded head coach. You got the weapons. You got the offensive line upgrade. The defense got upgraded. The pressure is all on him now.
It is, but at the same time, like, the pressure's on him, but I feel like it's a better situation now. Because when he got drafted, it really was like everybody was looking at it going, you know, don't expect big things year one. Like this is a 4-year development plan for Caleb Williams in Chicago. The good thing is, with the changes that were made in the coaching staff, we've seen Ryan Poles is really good at building personnel on the field. He's really good at making trades. He's really good at drafting. So there was no concern there. The concern was he's not had a great track record at hiring coaches.
Yes.
So the fact that he got that in there, that bodes well. And I feel like this has shrunk that 4-year window to a 2-year. Like, yes, it's going to be more pressure, but it's not necessarily like a short leash this year. And by next year, I think we'll see the Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams show really take off and be successful instead of having to wait 4 years with Eberflus.
Yeah, it is one of those things where, like I've said this beforehand, where the Bears, when they've done pretty much everything that I've asked them to do. Go out there, get the offensive-minded head coach. Go out there, get an established former head coach who is a defensive-minded guy to help him along to basically be the head coach of the defense, and have your staff be filled up with a bunch of really smart individuals. Again, the idea of having Eric Bieniemy as the running backs coach is huge. Like, this is a guy just 3 years ago, we were talking about being the favorite for being a head coach in multiple different locations. And the amount of knowledge that guy has, again, coming from an Andy Reid system, kind of doing his own things, just have him as the running backs coach is massive. It's something that this entire report, if you're a Bears fan, no one is going to be upset with Caleb. I am interested to see Caleb Williams' first press conference, what some of the comments are going to be, because people are going to ask him about it, and I'm intrigued to see what's going to be the situation. But the last thing that I will say about this entire thing is, obviously, all of this stuff Caleb knew happened, and he had his concerns about coming to this team, and this, that, and the other thing, all the things that we stated. Not once did Caleb Williams ever bring any of this up during that 10-game losing streak while he was the most sacked quarterback. Every single press conference, it was, his love for this team and how he needs to do better and how he's going to do better and this, that, and the other thing. Not like he had ample excuses to say, you know what, I had massive concerns coming here and I knew this was a mistake. Not once did he ever do that. Not even after the offseason. Coming into this is the first that we're hearing about it.
And it's really good that he never did that as well.
Yeah.
Because that would have created a negativity around his character that people in Chicago, especially because it's such a passionate city, they would not forgive.
No.
And so it's really good that he was able to keep his head about him and go, look, I'm just going to keep getting better and doing my thing. And, behind the scenes going, God, I hope Ryan Poles figures out a way to get this better here.
Yeah, it's
and he did.
He did, and at the end of the day, that's the only thing that really matters, is that the light at the end of the tunnel is on the horizon. It's not right there, but it's on the horizon. You can see the dimmer flicker of light. Now, again, there still needs to be a lot of things that go right in this scenario. But hopefully this is just one thing that, let's say in 5 years, every Chicago Bears fan is just looking at and giggling, going like, remember when that report came out of Caleb Williams saying he didn't want to be a Chicago Bear and this, that, and the other thing. And we have a Super Bowl under his belt and he's the best quarterback in the NFL under Ben Johnson. And the team is just basically the new Kansas City Chiefs at this point. Like, like that's the hope here.
Yeah. But
in what was a surprisingly newsy type week, it was good to kind of have that. But for Sterling, I'm Brendan saying thank you all very much for watching. Make sure to tune in for all this sort of stuff that we will continue to do throughout the offseason. But for both of us, peace.